I'm Audrey, 34, with a thriving interior design business and what I thought was a happy 8-year marriage to James, my law school sweetheart, turned corporate attorney. Last month, I borrowed his laptop to check my email and discovered something that shattered my world: wedding venue confirmations and vendor contracts. Not for our vow renewal, but for James and Natalie, his executive assistant. They'd been planning their future while I slept beside him every night, completely unaware he was preparing to replace me. Before I tell you how I uncovered their elaborate betrayal and what happened at their wedding drop, a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and hit subscribe if you've ever had that sinking feeling something wasn't right in your relationship. James and I met during our second year at Boston University Law School. We were assigned as partners for a mock trial, and our chemistry was undeniable, both in the courtroom and outside of it. He was brilliant, charming, and had this quiet confidence that drew me in immediately. After graduating, we both secured positions at different law firms in Boston, but I quickly realized corporate law wasn't my passion. James fully supported my decision when I left my firm to pursue interior design, my lifelong creative outlet. He seemed proud as I built my business from scratch, often bragging to colleagues about his designer wife's growing clientele. We purchased our colonial-style home in Brookline 3 years into our marriage. It was a fixer-upper that I transformed into a showcase of my design skills: vaulted ceilings in the living room, a gourmet kitchen with a marble island, and a primary suite that felt like a boutique hotel retreat. Our home was featured in Boston Home magazine last year, bringing in several high-profile clients. It was everything we dreamed about during those late-night study sessions in law school. Our life together seemed perfect from the outside. We had plans to buy a vacation cottage in Ogunquit, Maine, and had recently started discussing having children. We'd been waiting until James made partner and my business was stable enough that I could scale back slightly. The timing finally seemed right, and we'd agreed to start trying after his next promotion, which seemed imminent. Our social circle consisted mainly of other lawyers and their spouses from Harper & Wright, the prestigious firm where James had been climbing the ranks impressively. I'd arranged countless dinner parties in our home, helping him network with senior partners and impress clients. Though these events often exhausted me, especially after long days with my own clients, I considered it an investment in our shared future. James always seemed appreciative, pulling me close after guests left and thanking me for being the perfect partner. James's career at Harper & Wright had been on a steady upward trajectory since he joined 6 years ago. He specialized in corporate mergers and acquisitions, regularly working on high-profile cases that sometimes meant late nights and occasional weekend work. I never questioned his dedication to his job. His work ethic was one of the qualities I'd always admired about him. Everything changed about 18 months ago when the firm hired Natalie Peterson as James's executive assistant. She was 28, polished, and incredibly efficient, according to James. He mentioned how she'd reorganized his entire filing system and created templates that saved him hours of work. I was genuinely happy that he finally had competent help after his previous assistant retired. When I met Natalie at the firm's holiday party, she was warm and complimentary about our home, which she'd seen in the magazine feature. We chatted about design, and she mentioned wanting advice for her new apartment. I gave her my card and told her to reach out anytime. I actually liked her, found her intelligent and put together. She seemed to genuinely respect James and his work, and I appreciated anyone who recognized my husband's talents. Looking back, I can identify when things began to shift. James started working later more frequently. He upgraded his wardrobe, claiming the firm had implemented a more formal dress code. He began using a new cologne, not dramatically different, but not his usual scent either. His phone gained a new password after years of us knowing each other's codes, just in case. Each change seemed innocent in isolation, reasonable enough that I dismissed the occasional flicker of concern. I remember one night about 6 months ago, I woke around 2 a.m. to find James's side of the bed empty. I walked downstairs and found him in his home office laptop open. When he noticed me, he quickly closed whatever he was looking at, claiming he was just reviewing case notes for a morning meeting. He seemed startled, almost guilty, but I attributed it to being caught working at such a late hour when he should have been resting. Despite these subtle shifts, I trusted my husband completely. We'd built a life together, supported each other through career changes, family losses, and all of life's challenges. The thought that he could be living a double life seemed impossible, something that happened in movies, not in my marriage. For our upcoming 8th anniversary, I decided to surprise James with a weekend getaway to a luxury resort in the Berkshires. He'd been working particularly hard on a major acquisition case, and I thought we both deserved some uninterrupted time together. I'd been secretly planning it for weeks, coordinating with his assistant Natalie to ensure his schedule would be clear. She'd been helpful and enthusiastic about keeping the secret, which makes what I discovered next all the more devastating. It was a Thursday evening, and James was taking a shower after returning from work. I needed to finalize the reservation details for our anniversary trip, but my laptop was updating its software. Since James and I occasionally used each other's computers, I didn't think twice about opening his MacBook on the kitchen counter. As soon as the screen lit up, several email notifications appeared in the corner. What caught my eye immediately were the sender names Bellevue Estate Weddings and Premier Catering Boston. My first thought was confusion. Our anniversary was still months away, and we hadn't discussed renewing our vows or having any kind of celebration. Curiosity piqued. I clicked on the wedding venue email. It confirmed a 50% deposit for an event on Saturday, May 15th, just 2 months away. The amount was substantial, over $15,000. My heart began beating faster as I scrolled through the message, confused about why my husband would be planning such an expensive event without telling me. When I opened the attached PDF contract, my world collapsed around me. The document header read, "Wedding Agreement, James Wilson and Natalie Peterson." I stared at those words, reading them over and over, unable to process what I was seeing. My hands began to shake so badly, I could barely scroll through the pages detailing their ceremony preferences, reception menu selections, and accommodation arrangements for out-of-town guests. The contract included every detail: a string quartet for the ceremony, a 5-course dinner for 150 guests, a premium open bar, and a honeymoon suite booked for the night. It wasn't just some impulsive idea. This was a meticulously planned event that had clearly been in the works for months. I felt physically ill, a wave of nausea washing over me as I tried to comprehend what I was seeing. My ears began ringing and I felt lightheaded, gripping the counter to steady myself. The evidence was right there on the screen, but my mind kept rejecting it. This couldn't be real. There had to be some explanation. Just as I was scrolling through more details, I heard the bathroom door open. In a panic, I quickly closed the email and returned to the home screen, heart pounding wildly in my chest. James walked into the kitchen, hair still damp from the shower, wearing the gray Harvard Law t-shirt I'd given him years ago. "Hey, sorry to use your laptop. Mine's updating," I managed to say, amazed that my voice sounded almost normal despite the chaos inside me. "No problem," he replied casually, opening the refrigerator. "What do you feel like for dinner? I could make that pasta you like." I watched him, this man I'd shared my life with for a decade, calmly offering to cook dinner as though he hadn't been planning to marry another woman behind my back. The disconnect between this ordinary moment and the devastating truth I'd just discovered was surreal. "Pasta sounds good," I heard myself say, functioning on autopilot while my mind raced. Should I confront him immediately? Demand explanations? But what if he just denied everything or offered some excuse that I'd want desperately to believe? We moved through dinner preparation like actors following a script. He chopped vegetables while telling me about a challenging client meeting. I opened wine and set the table, nodding and responding at appropriate intervals, all while internally debating my next move. I needed time to think, to gather more information before confrontation. Throughout dinner, I studied his face, searching for signs of the stranger he apparently was. How could he sit across from me discussing mundane topics, knowing what he was planning? Did he feel any guilt at all? I'd always prided myself on being intuitive, on understanding people, yet I'd completely missed that my own husband was living a double life. That night was the longest of my life. I lay beside James in our bed, listening to his even breathing as he slept peacefully. My mind replayed our entire relationship, questioning every memory, every moment I'd thought was genuine. Had any of it been real? How long had he been planning this? Did everyone know except me? Morning came after a sleepless night. James kissed me goodbye as he left for what he claimed was a 3-day business trip to New York. He'd packed his best suits and the cufflinks I'd given him for his birthday. Was he even going to New York? Or was this time with her? The thought made me physically ill. As soon as his car pulled out of the driveway, I collapsed onto our kitchen floor and sobbed. Deep, guttural cries that seemed to come from somewhere primal inside me. The pain was physical, a crushing pressure in my chest that made it difficult to breathe. After about 20 minutes of uncontrolled crying, I forced myself to stop. Tears wouldn't solve anything. I needed answers, and I needed a plan. I called my best friend Melissa, but couldn't bring myself to explain everything over the phone. "Can you come over?" "Something's happened," was all I managed to say. "I'll be there in 30 minutes. She responded immediately, the concern evident in her voice. After hanging up, I washed my face with cold water and stared at my reflection. "You will get through this," I told myself firmly. "But first, you need to know exactly what you're dealing with." With James gone for the weekend, I had the perfect opportunity to investigate further. I started methodically working my way through our home, looking for any additional evidence. In his home office, I carefully searched through drawers and cabinets, making sure to return everything exactly as I found it. Behind his collection of law books, I discovered a metal box we'd used for important documents. Inside were credit card statements from an account I didn't recognize, a private card he'd apparently been maintaining for over a year. The statements revealed regular charges at high-end restaurants. I'd never been to jewelry purchases from Tiffany & Co., and several hotel charges in Boston where we lived. He wasn't even traveling. He was meeting her just miles from our home. One charge particularly stood out: a weekend at the Four Seasons in early December, when he'd told me he was attending a legal conference in Chicago. I remembered calling him that weekend, hearing city noise in the background as he described the freezing Chicago weather. The elaborate lies were stunning in their detail. My next discovery was even more damning. In his golf bag in the garage, tucked into a side pocket he assumed I'd never check, I found a burner phone. My hands trembled as I turned it on, dreading what I would find, yet needing to know. The phone contained only text messages and photos exchanged between him and Natalie. Their conversations were intimate and explicit, but what hurt most were the emotional exchanges, declarations of love inside jokes and discussions of their future together. In one particularly painful thread from 3 months ago, they discussed a weekend getaway. "Natalie, miss you already. These stolen moments aren't enough anymore. James, I know, sweetheart. Just a little longer until we can be together properly. Natalie. Sometimes I feel guilty about Audrey. James. We've talked about this. She'll be fine. Her business is doing well and she's independent. This is about our happiness. I've never felt this way about anyone." Their casual dismissal of our marriage of me sent a wave of anger through me so intense I had to sit down. This wasn't just an affair. It was a calculated plan to discard me. With growing determination, I turned to his computer. When he'd showered the previous evening, I had glimpsed his password as he typed it earlier. NatJam 2023. A combination of their names and apparently the year they planned to marry. The blatant carelessness stung. He hadn't even bothered to be careful. Logging into his email revealed months of correspondence between them. They'd been forwarding wedding venue information, discussing guest lists, and planning their future home, which incredibly they wanted to purchase in our same neighborhood. They'd even attended open houses together while I was at client meetings. The most devastating discovery came in an email thread with the subject line, "Next Steps." In clinical, almost businesslike terms, they discussed how to ease Audrey out of the picture. James had identified a loophole in our prenuptial agreement involving business assets. If he could demonstrate that my design business was failing and that I'd made poor financial decisions, he could protect most of his assets and significantly reduce any settlement. In another email, James had written, "I've started laying groundwork with friends about problems in our marriage. Nothing obvious, just mentions of growing apart and her being increasingly distant with her work. It will make the separation seem natural when it happens." I sat motionless, staring at these words from the man who had vowed to love and protect me. He wasn't just planning to leave. He was orchestrating a narrative that would absolve him of guilt and potentially leave me financially vulnerable. Further searching uncovered photos of them together on trips he'd claimed were for work, sailing in San Diego, hiking in Colorado, even a weekend in Montreal, where they'd apparently first discussed marriage. In each photo, they looked blissfully happy while I'd been at home, trusting and oblivious. One email thread contained their discussion about children. James thus always thought I wanted kids, but the timing never seemed right with Audrey. With you, I can actually imagine our family. Natalie. You'll be an amazing father. Sometimes I picture a little boy with your eyes and smile. James. We should start trying right after the wedding. No point waiting once we're official. That exchange cut deeper than anything else. We'd been discussing starting a family for years, but James had always found reasons to delay. His career, my business, waiting for the perfect time. Now I understood those delays had nothing to do with timing and everything to do with his uncertainty about our future. The final blow was discovering messages where they mocked my trust and obliviousness and Natalie. She really has no idea. Does she? James, none. Asked about my business trip next weekend with complete innocence. Natalie. Must be nice living in her bubble. James. Let's just focus on us. May 15th, and this double life is over. Reading their casual cruelty transformed my pain into something harder and colder. The shock and heartbreak began crystallizing into anger and resolve. They weren't just betraying me. They were laughing about it, taking pleasure in my ignorance. As I methodically copied emails, took screenshots, and forwarded evidence to my personal email account, a plan began forming in my mind. They thought I was a fool living in a bubble of ignorance. They had severely underestimated me. When Melissa arrived, I was sitting calmly at our kitchen island, surrounded by printed emails, financial statements, and my laptop open to James and Natalie's wedding website, complete with their engagement photos taken on what James had told me was a firm retreat. "What's all this?" Melissa asked, concern etched on her face as she took in the scene. "Evidence," I replied simply, then proceeded to walk her through everything I'd discovered. Her expressions shifted from confusion to shock to outrage as I detailed the extent of their betrayal and their plans for me. "That absolute bastard," she finally said, her voice shaking with anger. "And that two-faced assistant. I met her at your Christmas party. She complimented your home knowing she planned to take it." Melissa pulled me into a fierce hug as the composure I'd been maintaining finally cracked. I sobbed against her shoulder, letting out the raw pain I'd been trying to process alone. She held me until the tears subsided, then looked me directly in the eyes. "What do you need from me? Whatever it is, I'm here." That simple offer of unconditional support was exactly what I needed to transition from victim to strategist. Over the next several hours, Melissa and I outlined a plan of action, beginning with securing legal representation. The following day, I contacted Sarah Dalton, a formidable divorce attorney who'd been a year ahead of us in law school. I'd kept in touch with her casually over the years, occasionally meeting for coffee. I chose her specifically because she wasn't connected to James's professional circle, but understood the legal world he operated in. Sarah listened without interruption as I presented the evidence I'd gathered, occasionally taking notes. When I finished, she looked up with steely determination. "First, I'm so sorry you're experiencing this, Audrey. What they're planning is not just emotionally devastating, it's potentially financial sabotage. But you've been smart to gather evidence before confronting him. Many clients act immediately and lose the advantage of documentation." She recommended that I take several immediate steps: document all joint assets, secure copies of our financial records, and monitor our accounts without making obvious changes that would alert James. Most importantly, she advised against immediate confrontation. "Right now you have the element of surprise. Use it. Let them continue thinking you're in the dark while we prepare your case. If you confront James now, he'll accelerate whatever financial maneuvers he's planning. Following Sarah's advice, I met with a financial advisor who specialized in high-asset divorces. He helped me understand our complete financial picture and identified several concerning transactions where James had been moving smaller amounts to accounts I didn't recognize, not enough to raise immediate alarms, but significant when totaled. This is classic pre-divorce planning, the advisor explained. He's creating a financial cushion you're not supposed to know about. With professional guidance, I began securing my own financial position, opening individual accounts, documenting my business assets, and gathering records of my contributions to our joint property. I didn't move large sums that would alert James, but ensured I wouldn't be left destitute if he acted on his plans suddenly. Throughout this process, a clearer picture emerged of their timeline. They planned to announce their relationship shortly after the surprise wedding, presenting it as a whirlwind romance that began recently, rather than the year-long affair it actually was. James would then inform me he wanted a divorce using the fabricated narrative of our marriage having been troubled for some time. The more I uncovered about their elaborate deception, the more my shock transformed into cold determination. I created a detailed timeline documenting the affair alongside James's deliberate financial moves, building a case that would be difficult to dispute. As I worked with Sarah on legal preparations, Melissa raised an unexpected suggestion during one of our strategy sessions. What if you showed up at their wedding? My initial reaction was hesitation. A public scene isn't really my style. This isn't about style, Audrey. They're literally planning to celebrate their relationship with friends and family who know you. People who might even feel sorry for you afterward based on whatever story James spins. They deserve to know the truth. The idea took root as I considered it further. The surprise wedding was positioned as a work event to explain the short notice. Many guests would be colleagues, friends, and family who knew me, people who might later be told lies about why our marriage ended. If you're worried about looking like the crazy ex, Melissa continued, we can make it clinical. Just facts. No screaming or wine throwing, though God knows they deserve it. Just the truth presented clearly. After careful consideration and discussion with Sarah, who confirmed that a public revelation wouldn't negatively impact divorce proceedings, especially since I had documented evidence of their deception, I decided on a strategic approach to the wedding. When James returned from his business trip, I greeted him with practiced normalcy. He brought me a small gift, a scarf he claimed to have found in a Manhattan boutique, though the bag was from a shop I knew existed in Boston's Copley Place Mall. I accepted it with a smile complimenting his thoughtfulness, while mentally adding this lie to my documentation. Over dinner, he casually mentioned an upcoming firm event at Bellevue Estate, the very venue booked for his wedding. The partners are recognizing some key client relationships, he explained. It's a formal event on Saturday, May 15th. I'd love for you to be there. Many of the senior partners' spouses will attend. I watched him deliver this lie with perfect sincerity, noting how his eyes maintained contact with mine, how naturally he described this fictional event. Had he always been this skilled at deception, or had the affair honed this ability? Of course I'll be there, I replied, mirroring his casual tone. I wouldn't miss it. Later that night, as James slept beside me, I lay awake contemplating the weeks ahead. The physical and emotional strain of maintaining this facade while planning my response was intense. I'd lost weight, struggled with insomnia, and felt constant anxiety. But beneath the stress was a growing clarity about my worth and a determination that James and Natalie would not succeed in their callous plan. I wasn't just going to walk away, I whispered to myself in the darkness. I was going to make sure everyone knew exactly who they were celebrating. The 2 weeks leading up to the wedding were a masterclass in emotional endurance. Each morning I'd wake up beside the husband I now knew was counting down the days until he could publicly replace me. Each night I'd lie awake planning exactly how I would ensure that day wouldn't go as expected. The physical toll was evident. I'd lost nearly 10 pounds, dark circles shadowed my eyes, despite expensive concealer, and friends had started asking if I was feeling well. I attributed my appearance to a demanding new client project, which wasn't entirely untrue. I had thrown myself into work as both distraction and financial security. James became increasingly distant, spending more nights at the office than at home. When he was home, he was distracted, often taking calls in his car or bathroom. The man wasn't just having an affair, he was actively planning an entire second life while dismantling our first one. Through my continued access to his email, I monitored the wedding preparations with clinical detachment. The venue was an elegant vineyard estate in the Berkshires that normally booked years in advance. They'd secured it through a cancellation and paid a premium for the late booking. The event planning emails described an upscale ceremony and reception for approximately 150 guests, many of whom I knew personally. Their invitations had gone out just 10 days before the event, describing it as a surprise celebration hosted by James. The deliberate vagueness was clearly designed to get people to attend without revealing the true nature of the event. From email responses, I could see that nearly everyone had RSVP'd. Yes, including James's parents, who adored me and had no idea their son was planning to replace their daughter-in-law. While maintaining my facade of ignorance, I worked methodically to secure my future. I transferred personal belongings of sentimental value, family photographs, jewelry from my grandmother, personal journals, to a storage unit Melissa helped me rent under her name. I didn't take anything that would be noticed missing, but ensured my irreplaceable items were protected. With Sarah's guidance, I documented our financial status comprehensively. We discovered that James had been systematically moving small amounts of money, never enough to trigger alerts, to a separate account for over 8 months. The total now approached $90,000. Sarah assured me this would work against him in divorce proceedings, especially combined with evidence of his planned deception. Using my design business connections, I quietly secured a beautiful apartment in Cambridge, signing a 6-month lease to begin immediately. I arranged for essential furniture to be delivered the day after the wedding. Melissa helped stock it with basics: towels, kitchen supplies, bedding, so I wouldn't have to return to our shared home if things became untenable. For the confrontation itself, I prepared meticulously. I created a digital presentation of evidence that was factual rather than emotional: screenshots of their messages, timeline of the affair, documentation of financial deception. I organized everything on a USB drive and made multiple copies. I also printed key documents in a portfolio, backup in case technology failed. Throughout this preparation, I maintained contact with James's family, particularly his mother Linda, who called to confirm she was attending the firm event. The confusion in her voice was evident when she mentioned looking forward to seeing me there, clearly unaware her presence was for her son's wedding to another woman. "Is everything all right, dear?" she asked during our call. "You sound tired." I nearly broke then, almost telling this woman who had treated me like a daughter for 10 years that her son was living a double life. Instead, I assured her I was just busy with work and looking forward to seeing her at the event. The fact that James was willing to blindside even his parents with this surprise wedding revealed the extent of his moral compromise. 3 days before the wedding, I met with Sarah to finalize the divorce filing, which she would submit electronically the morning of the wedding. This timing was strategic. The papers would be filed before my public revelation, preventing any claim that I was acting out of emotional impulse rather than with legal preparation. "Are you absolutely sure about confronting them at the event?" Sarah asked during our meeting. "You have solid legal standing without the public element." "I'm sure," I replied without hesitation. "This isn't just about the legal outcome. They plan to humiliate me privately, letting me discover their relationship after the fact, then spin whatever narrative suited them to our friends and family. I won't give them that power." The night before the wedding, I left a note in James's briefcase, a place I knew he wouldn't check until after the ceremony. It was simple: "Marriage vows are meant to be kept, not collected. See you at the celebration." He would find it too late to stop what I had set in motion, a small satisfaction in the grand scheme of things. On the morning of May 15th, James left early, claiming he needed to prepare for the client presentation. He kissed my cheek distantly, mentioning he'd see me at the venue at 4 p.m. I watched him drive away in his freshly detailed car wearing his best suit and the watch I'd given him for our 5th anniversary. After he left, I stood in the middle of our home, the space I'd lovingly designed where I'd believed we were building a life together. I allowed myself one final moment of grief for the marriage I thought I had, the future we'd planned, the trust I'd given so completely. This is not where your story ends, I told myself firmly, wiping away a single tear. This is where you reclaim it. The Bellevue estate was even more beautiful than the photos in the email attachments had suggested. Set on 20 acres of manicured grounds and vineyards, the main building was a restored 19th century mansion with elegant white columns and a sweeping staircase. As I drove through the iron gates, I noted the arrangements of white roses and cascading greenery adorning the entrance, certainly not typical decor for a corporate function. I'd chosen my outfit carefully. A tailored navy blue dress that was professional yet striking, paired with the diamond earrings James had given me for our last anniversary. My hair was swept into a sleek updo, makeup flawless but understated. If this was to be my final appearance as James Wilson's wife, I would look impeccable. Arriving exactly at 4 p.m., I observed guests gathering on the venue's stone terrace. Many were familiar faces from our social circle, law partners and their spouses, longtime friends, even my former colleagues from my brief legal career. They mingled with champagne flutes in hand, their expressions revealing varying degrees of confusion about the event's purpose. Through the venue's windows, I glimpsed reception tables elegantly set with crystal and silver elaborate floral centerpieces and a multi-tiered cake in the corner. Certainly not corporate event decor. Some guests had begun to notice these details as well, exchanging puzzled glances and whispered conversations. I spotted James's parents near the entrance. Linda Wilson rushed over when she saw me, embracing me warmly. "Audrey, darling, we're so confused about this event. James was very mysterious about the whole thing. Do you know what's happening?" "I believe it will all become clear soon," I replied with a calm smile. "How was your flight in from Chicago?" As we chatted, I positioned myself strategically near the AV equipment set up at the front of the main hall. The venue coordinator was making final adjustments to a projector and screen, presumably for James's client presentation. At 4:30, I saw James emerge from a side room looking nervous but excited in his tuxedo. His eyes widened in momentary panic when he spotted me conversing with his mother. He quickly composed himself and approached us, his smile too bright, too forced. "Mom, Audrey, I'm so glad you're both here. Would you excuse us for a moment? I need to borrow my wife briefly." He guided me firmly by the elbow to a quiet corner, his fingers digging slightly into my arm. Once we were alone, his facade dropped, replaced by barely controlled alarm. "I didn't expect you so early," he said, voice low and tense. "You said 4 p.m., didn't you? I wouldn't want to miss the beginning of the presentation." I maintained a pleasant expression, noting the beads of sweat forming at his hairline. "About that, there's been a change in the program. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable joining later. I can have the valet bring your car around." "I'm perfectly comfortable now, James. In fact, I've been looking forward to this event for weeks. Ever since I saw the emails, actually." The blood drained from his face as understanding dawned. His eyes darted around the room, likely searching for Natalie or an escape route. "Audrey, whatever you think you know, I know everything," I interrupted calmly. "Every email, every message, every hotel receipt, every lie you've told me while planning your new life. And in about 20 minutes, everyone else will know too." As James stammered through the beginning of what would undoubtedly be another lie, I noticed a commotion at the entrance. Natalie had arrived, wearing a fitted white dress that stopped just short of being an obvious bridal gown. Her expression shifted from glowing excitement to horror when she spotted me speaking with James. Before James could continue, an older gentleman in clerical attire entered carrying a leather portfolio, unmistakably the officiant. This arrival prompted additional confused murmurs among the guests, many now openly questioning the nature of the gathering. James excused himself abruptly, rushing to intercept Natalie and the officiant. I watched their urgent whispered conversation, Natalie's gestures becoming increasingly agitated as she repeatedly glanced in my direction. At 5 p.m., with all guests assembled, James reluctantly stepped to the front of the room. The nervous energy radiating from him was palpable as he tapped a knife against a champagne flute to gain everyone's attention. "Friends, family, colleagues, thank you all for coming today," he began, voice slightly unsteady. "I know the invitation was somewhat mysterious, and I appreciate your trust in showing up without all the details." Murmurs rippled through the crowd as people exchanged puzzled glances. "Today isn't actually a client appreciation event," James continued, forcing a smile. "It's a celebration of love and new beginnings. Today I'm honored to announce that Natalie and I are getting married. Right now, in fact." Gasps echoed through the room. Confused glances turned toward me, standing calmly at the side of the room. From the corner of my eye, I saw James's mother's hand fly to her mouth in shock, his father's expression hardening into disbelief. "I know this comes as a surprise." James pressed on his confidence, visibly wavering as he observed the stunned reactions. "Natalie and I have found something special together, and we wanted to share this moment with all of you." Taking advantage of the momentary silence that followed this announcement, I stepped forward, my heels clicking deliberately on the hardwood floor. "Before the ceremony begins, I'd like to say a few words to congratulate the couple." James's expression was a mixture of fear and fury as I approached the front of the room, but with over 100 witnesses, he could hardly physically stop me. Natalie took a step backward, clutching her small bouquet like a shield. "For those who don't know me, I'm Audrey Wilson, James's wife of 8 years. I smiled pleasantly at the assembled guests, many of whom were looking increasingly uncomfortable. "I've prepared a small presentation for this special occasion." Before anyone could intervene, I connected my USB drive to the venue's laptop already linked to the projector. The screen illuminated with the first slide a timeline titled, "The Secret Relationship, a Chronology." "James and Natalie have indeed found something special together," I continued in a steady voice. "They've been building their relationship for over a year, while James was still very much married to me. Let me share some highlights of their journey." With clinical precision, I walked the stunned audience through the evidence I'd compiled: screenshots of intimate messages exchanged during family holidays, photos of them together on weekends. James had claimed to be at conferences, hotel receipts from rendezvous just miles from our home. "This isn't just a story of an affair," I explained as I transitioned to the financial evidence. "It's also about systematic deception and financial manipulation." The next slides detailed James's hidden accounts, the funds he'd been diverting, and most damning, the email exchanges where they discussed how to minimize my divorce settlement by claiming my business was failing. I particularly appreciated their attention to detail. I noted clicking to an email where they discussed their plan. "James was careful to tell several of you in this room that we were having problems creating a narrative of a troubled marriage to justify what would come next." Throughout my presentation, the room remained in shocked silence. James made several attempts to interrupt, but each time he started to speak, another damning piece of evidence appeared on screen, effectively silencing him. Natalie had retreated to a corner, her face ashen wedding bouquet hanging limply at her side. I noticed James's parents had moved to the opposite side of the room from their son, his mother wiping tears, his father's arm protectively around her shoulders. Several of James's colleagues were looking at him with undisguised contempt, particularly the female partners who had always supported me at firm events. "In conclusion," I said, displaying the final slide, "I want to thank you all for coming to this surprise event, though I suspect it wasn't the surprise James and Natalie had planned. I should mention that divorce papers were filed this morning citing adultery and financial deception. My attorney has all the evidence you've seen today, plus considerably more." I turned directly to face James and Natalie. "I sincerely hope you both get exactly what you deserve, each other. Building a relationship on lies and betrayal creates a foundation that will eventually collapse under its own weight." Unplugging my USB drive, I addressed the stunned crowd one final time. "I apologize for any discomfort this revelation has caused, especially to those who traveled to be here. I believe you deserve to know the truth before celebrating this union." With my head held high, I walked calmly through the silent crowd toward the exit. As I passed James's mother, she reached out and squeezed my hand, tears streaming down her face. "We had no idea, Audrey. Please know that." Behind me, chaos erupted. I heard James calling my name, the officiant asking if they should proceed, guests beginning to talk all at once. I didn't look back, continuing my deliberate walk to the exit where Melissa was waiting in her car as planned. As I stepped outside into the early evening air, I took my first deep breath in weeks. The weight of deception and pretense lifted from my shoulders as I walked away from the life that had been built on lies toward an uncertain but authentic future of my own choosing. Sitting in Melissa's car in the vineyard parking lot, I finally allowed the emotions I'd been controlling so carefully to surface. My hands trembled as the adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation began to subside. Melissa simply held my hand in silence, giving me space to process what had just happened. "It's done," I finally whispered, a mixture of exhaustion and relief washing over me. "You were magnificent in there," she replied, absolutely ice-cold and completely dignified. They never saw it coming. On the drive back to the city, I silenced my phone as it exploded with notifications. Calls from James, text messages from friends who'd been at the wedding, voicemails from his family members. I would deal with all of it later. For now, I needed space to breathe and begin processing the end of my marriage and the beginning of whatever came next. That first weekend was a blur of practical necessities. Melissa helped me move essential items into my new Cambridge apartment, while James was still dealing with the fallout at the venue. The space was smaller than our Brookline home, but filled with light overlooking a tree-lined street, a blank canvas for this next chapter. By Sunday evening, when James finally tracked down my location through a mutual friend, I was settled enough to have Sarah relay that all communication should go through our respective attorneys. His desperate texts ranged from rage, "How could you humiliate me like that?" to bargaining, "We need to talk, I can explain everything," to self-pity, "You've destroyed my reputation at the firm." I read them once, then blocked his number. The professional consequences for James were swift and severe. Harper and Wright placed him on immediate administrative leave pending an ethics review, particularly concerned about the financial improprieties I documented. 2 major clients requested their accounts be transferred to other partners. His carefully cultivated professional reputation built over years crumbled in a single weekend. Natalie resigned from the firm the Monday following the wedding debacle. According to Melissa's sources, she left Boston entirely, returning to her hometown in Arizona. Their romance, which had seemed worth risking everything for, apparently couldn't survive the harsh light of public exposure and professional consequences. Support came from unexpected quarters. James's parents called Sarah, requesting to meet with me privately. Over coffee the following week, they expressed their profound apologies and unwavering support, making it clear they considered me family regardless of their son's actions. This gesture of solidarity brought me to tears, the first I'd shed since the confrontation. "We raised him better than this," James's father said gravely. "Whatever happens with the divorce, you will always be our daughter." The divorce proceedings moved forward with surprising efficiency. With irrefutable evidence of adultery and financial deception, James had little leverage for negotiation. He accepted a settlement that exceeded what would have been required under our prenuptial agreement, likely eager to avoid the public spectacle of a trial after the wedding fiasco. Throughout those initial months, I experienced the full spectrum of emotions that accompany betrayal and divorce. Rage that would wake me at 3 a.m., grief that would strike unexpectedly when passing places we'd frequented together, fear about building a life entirely on my own, and occasionally exhausting indifference where I simply couldn't summon any feeling at all. On my therapist's recommendation, I began keeping a journal documenting this journey of unwanted but necessary reinvention. Initially, the entries were raw outpourings of hurt and anger, but gradually they evolved into reflections on what I was learning about myself, my resilience, and what I truly wanted from life moving forward. My interior design business became both refuge and triumph during this period. I threw myself into client projects, channeling my emotional energy into creating beautiful spaces for others while redesigning my own life. A feature in Boston Magazine about women entrepreneurs brought new clients and opportunities, expanding my business beyond what I'd achieved while managing James's social calendar and supporting his career. 6 months after the wedding confrontation, I began noticing subtle shifts in my healing process. I could go entire days without thinking about James or the betrayal. I started rediscovering parts of myself that had been sublimated during our marriage. My love of modern art that James had never appreciated, my interest in travel photography, my preference for spontaneous outings over meticulously planned events. I reconnected with friends from before my marriage and developed new friendships, particularly with other women rebuilding after significant life changes. These connections, based on authentic sharing of our struggles and triumphs, felt deeper and more meaningful than many of the socially strategic relationships I'd maintained as James's wife. 1 year after filing for divorce, I received the final decree along with the settlement transfer. I marked the occasion not with celebration, but with a private ritual of release, writing down every memory hurt and lingering question about the marriage, then burning the pages on the small balcony of my apartment, watching the ashes scatter into the night. The woman who emerged from this experience was different from the one who had discovered those wedding emails 14 months earlier. I was more cautious, but also more confident, less willing to silence my intuition and fiercely protective of my independence. I'd learned to trust myself even when it meant facing painful truths. Perhaps most surprisingly, I eventually found a path to a kind of forgiveness, not the kind that excused James and Natalie's actions or welcomed them back into my life, but the kind that allowed me to release the anger that had initially fueled my survival. I realized that maintaining rage, however justified, was binding me to them and to the past. True freedom meant letting go of that emotional tether. Through therapy and reflection, I came to understand that James's betrayal reflected his own character flaws rather than my worthiness of love and loyalty. The elaborate deception revealed fundamental weaknesses in him that would have eventually surfaced regardless of who he married. This perspective didn't erase the pain, but helped transform it from an acute, debilitating wound to a significant but manageable part of my history. 2 years after that fateful wedding day, my life had taken shape in ways I couldn't have imagined while lying awake beside a husband planning to replace me. My design business had expanded to include commercial projects alongside residential work. I'd purchased a small but charming condo in Cambridge, the first property that was entirely mine. I'd even begun cautiously dating again, approaching relationships with clearer boundaries and expectations. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I hadn't borrowed James's laptop that evening, or if I'd confronted him immediately instead of investigating further. Would he have convinced me to doubt my own perceptions? Would I have accepted a less equitable settlement out of emotional exhaustion? Would they have succeeded in their plan to celebrate their relationship, while I remained ignorant of the full truth? I'll never know those alternate outcomes, but I'm certain that choosing to face the painful truth head-on and ensuring others knew it too, was an act of self-respect that became the foundation for rebuilding my life. I decided to share my story, not for vindication or sympathy, but because I know others are silently enduring similar betrayals, questioning their worth, and wondering if they can survive such deception. To them, I offer this hard-earned wisdom: losing someone who doesn't truly value you is not a loss at all. It's the beginning of finding yourself again, the authentic self that deserves genuine love and respect. Have you ever had that moment where you knew something was wrong but doubted yourself anyway, or that gut feeling that saved you from an even bigger heartbreak? Share your experience in the comments below. And if my story resonated with you, please subscribe to hear more journeys of resilience and self-discovery. Remember, sometimes the most painful endings lead to the most beautiful beginnings. Thank you for listening, and take care of yourself and your intuition. It's usually trying to tell you something important.